So no listener questions this week.
Ooh.
So this episode will drop next Thursday, which is the 26th, the day after Christmas. So this is the last episode of 2024. So I figured we could all do a little 2024 recap and then 2025 look ahead. I know Drew, you're excited to tell us about some of your training plans.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first though? Caitlyn?
I'm not going first.
Sure.
I don't
want. Why aren't you going first?
Me?
I don't know.
No, Drew.
Drew?
Why don't you want to go first?
Yeah, because then they'll hear how cool my training is, and then they might just zone out.
Let's hear Caitlyn first.
Just kidding.
Yeah, let's save the best for last, and whoever that may be, it's not gonna be me, so I'll go first.
I bet I'm excited to hear what Adam's gonna say, honestly. So are we gonna start with our 2024 recap?
Do we have to recap it? I mean, I feel
No,
like
that's what Adam said. He said
so I figured like we can talk a little bit about what some things we tried that we felt like worked, some things that didn't work.
Okay. Specific to training.
Yeah. I mean, training, racing, whatever.
people don't want to hear about your DIY projects that didn't work, Drew.
Yeah. There's a lot happened this year, so you really got to narrow it down. Yeah.
Did you type something up for us, Caitlyn?
I did not. I'm pulling up my training peaks. Just
okay. Oh, I like that.
Just to kind of roughly skim through it. Because to be honest, I'm so thankful we did this because I thought I had done nothing like over the winter. Because we moved this time last year, cross country move that took a lot out of us. We had stuff in Virginia, stuff in North Carolina, and then the cross country haul to Flagstaff. And we moved in and
a year?
We moved in and immediately started demoing because we wanted to hit it hard in the winter. And then
we said no DIY stuff.
For real. Let's get to the training already.
But we did that because we knew we'd be gone all summer, and that's when the training would really happen. But, so I was like, I didn't do crap. I'm not going to have anything to talk about. But on the contrary, my friends, I did everything, which is super cool to see. So in December, let's see, we moved, and I was just telling Adam this. I was really excited because I thought we were going to have a white Christmas here and we were going to start skiing immediately, but it was dry and we actually rode for quite a while when we got here. So I'll jump to, I think I was still working with you, Adam, at the end of December or early December before the move. And then I blamed it on the move when I fired you. No, I just
pretty much
knew I wasn't going to have a ton of time. Not that I wasn't going to have a ton of time. I was just going to be super distracted. So there was a couple weeks of nothing happening. And then, I still started doing some riding, doing some easy running. And then I thought it would be fun to do, try some reverse periodization because I didn't want to spend a ton of time on the trainer. But immediately moving to 7,000 feet and doing VO2s didn't go so well. So that was a little discouraging. But then we got some good snow.
So was the reverse periodization, the intensity sessions you were doing, was that all on the bike or were you doing some cross training at that point too? Because I know you started mixing in some other modes. I
was just structuring the rides because I was like, I'll do intensity on the rides. Everything else is going to be endurance. The Nordic skiing, the running. And I held true to that for a good bit. I probably did 4 weeks of VO2 work on the bike, but then I signed up for a Nordic ski race that was at the end of February, and really wanted to do that as much as I could because it's, for those who haven't tried it, it's pretty much all technique. Like I had older gentlemen with a spare tire, if you know what I mean, flying by me like I was standing still because they just had the technique down, and I'm working so hard.
Hey, maybe they were super fit.
Hey,
you know what I like about cycling is that out of all the endurance sports, it's probably the least technique. It's probably the sport where technique matters the least. Like when I ran, my running form was terrible, and then in swimming, your form matters a lot, and skiing, your technique matters a lot. And I'm just happy that I'm in a sport where that doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could argue that like mountain biking requires skill,
Yeah,
but
for
as far as
sure.
like to pedal the bike though, the technique to do so, yeah, I agree.
I would say it's like a confidence thing, though, to be able to ride in a group. Like that would
There's
freak
skill,
people
but
out.
I think skill is a little bit different than technique and form.
Yeah, I mean, so like the difference with cycling, I guess, is that you're not gonna. Some would argue otherwise with this. Some people think that pedaling technique matters a lot. I wouldn't put myself in that camp, but in order to ride the bike fast, you don't need to like practice pedaling.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
All right, let's get into some meat here. What do we got?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I won the 5K. I didn't have much. Many people
the
showed
skiing
up for
5K?
Yeah, that was end of
I
February.
think you just said you were getting whooped by all these old guys.
No, they were the ones doing the real athletes were doing the 10K, and I did the 5K.
Okay. Gotcha. Nice.
That was the end of February, and then Cactus Cup, like next weekend. So that was not great. If you don't know, Southwest riding starts pretty early, so that was the first weekend in March. Cactus Cup is like a 3-day thing. There's a mountain bike time trial, 40-mile cross country race, and then an enduro. Time trial was good because I had been doing short, intense stuff. And then Saturday's 40-mile race, I would say I raced competitively for the first 20 miles, and then the lack of riding caught up with me, and that hurt coming in. And then the enduro was super fun. It was a very pedally enduro, and that went well. And then switched gears and was pretty much just running after that.
So did you switch to running because you had running goals, or just because the opposite, you didn't have any bike goals?
Yeah, I would say I didn't. I just had started running again and started feeling like I ran in college and had ignored it for a long time since then, and had finally started to build back that running efficiency, and it just felt good. But then there's some more local races, like first weekend in April, there was we call it the Verde Valley Rally, and it was a road crit on Saturday and then a mountain bike race on Sunday. And I did both days, and it was so fun. I think I took second in the crit. There was a girl up ahead, didn't know, but won the field sprint. And then Sunday, I took third in the mountain bike race. So still like the running and the riding that I had been doing, I don't know. I was just pleasantly surprised that it was enough to like feel fit during these events. So yeah, I had jokingly told Blaine, like every time I've raced this year, I only ride when I race, just because I've been loving the running so much. And I would, at that time, I should say, I also switched to doing my intensity and doing structure during the run. So I was doing track workouts. And then
track workouts are fun.
They're so fun.
I don't think I had ever done any because I never ran like you ran in college. So, but I had never, the only workouts that I had done had been bike workouts and gym workouts. But like intervals like that, I'd never done anything off the bike. And so to go and do a running interval workout on a track was like a whole new world to me a couple of years ago. And I was like, well, it's like, I don't know. It's just something, it's so different than cycling. And I just thought it was fun. Yeah. To mix it up.
I hate that I'm going to say this, but for the sake of honesty, it's so easy to start a bike interval. And then if you're not feeling it, for me, just like stop. But once your recovery is up on the track and you start that, you're just going to fit. It's so weird. It's much.
Well, it's different on the track too, because most of the time on the track, you're doing distance intervals, not necessarily time duration intervals.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think too, there's something about having the instant feedback of the power meter, whereas like if you're not hitting your number, you know instantly that you're not hitting the number.
True. Yeah.
And you
look
kind
at
of
your
get down
split
on yourself, and
halfway
you're like, oh,
make up.
I can't do this interval. I'm gonna stop now. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas on the track, you can look down at your split, like at the 200 or 150, whatever you're doing, and be like, okay, I can make up some time here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But by that point, you know, you're already a minute or more in.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was doing some track work, and then we got the Flyers. So I got involved with the youth program, specifically the race and development team here in town, because the female coach at the time was pregnant and she needed a replacement. So I started coming, and then I was doing double days through the spring because I wanted to keep running in the morning. And then the practices were after school, the bike practices. And I thought I was going to show up and I thought I was working with middle schoolers, but like these were high school kids and they were proper fast. So I would do a run in the morning and then a 2-hour bike practice with them on Tuesday, Thursdays. So all this stuff was just adding up that I had forgotten about. And then we took a week and we did a little Patagonia gravel camp with our friends. Just south of Tucson, kind of like right on the border of Mexico, and we van camped and did some big hours there. And then it was like some more local racing, and then we got into the summer and we went to Breckenridge, and Blaine and I we just picked fun events this year. We did the Firecracker 50 as a duo in Breckenridge on the 4th of July. And then, yeah, that kind of started our summer van camp. And then, I hate to say it, but got pretty something like after 2 weeks in the van, I just am kind of ready to be home now that we do have a home. So we came back, kind of reset. This was after Crested Butte. We spent a week there, and I didn't get to do a ton there. Not that I'm blaming Blaine, but him and his buddy did a lot of big ridings. So I was on dog duty, and I absolutely fell in love with Crested Butte. So we came back to Flag. And then I packed up the Bronco, took the tent, and I was like, I'm going to go camp there for a week. Drove, went to Silverton, did a lot of running there. And
How far is like CB from where you guys are in Flag?
9 hours. So I went 5 hours to Silverton and Ouray area and camped there.
Okay.
And then did some big run hikes there, and then went to Crested Butte, and all I did was zone 2 because it's at 9,000 feet, and I alternated big day on the feet, big day on the bike. So like 5-hour run hike, 5-hour ride, 3-hour run hike, 4-hour ride, and my body felt so balanced. And I was camping, I was on my own, and I didn't have Blaine like over my shoulder saying like, you gotta fuel. And so, not that I was doing it intentionally, there was some intentional fasting happening in the morning, but I was probably pretty underfueled during that time. Didn't realize till after, because then the following week was light, and then the week after that was 6-day stage race, Breck Epic. And then I felt good through that. I actually felt like I improved every day, and I really attribute that to the big days in CB to get me ready for that. But yeah, after that, I like missed my cycle 3 months. And I think that was just under fueling, and then kind of rebounded pretty hard. And yeah, I was pretty smoked after that. And then, even though I say that, the the week we came back from Brick, I did a 6-hour duo with a friend in town because, again, it was just like a local lap thing. And the two of us won that, so that was cool. So, again, it's just really surprising. Probably not surprising for Dylan to say, like, yeah, big volume works, especially when you're trying to do longer things. So, yeah, and then I mean, it's just been more of the same, alternating between runs, rides, yoga. Hopefully we get good snow here, and I'll hit the skis again. But I haven't been cross-country racing. Like, I've been doing 40-mile plus events. So
Sure.
I would say that's why this has worked.
Do you
and that's
feel
still
like,
what I'm interested in.
what do you feel like, so I mean, a big theme for you, it seemed like this year was just like a mixture of modalities and kind of like overall well balanced training. So you're talking about, you know, mixing up between the running and the cycling quite a bit. Did you feel, I know you said you felt good overall, but did you ever feel like one was taking away from the other at times, or did you always feel like they were both having a good overlap in being constructive towards either modality?
No, I felt, like I said, pretty balanced, but I think that comes from your mindset. Like, if you say you want to be all into cycling and you're truly splitting your time between these different modalities, then you're actually 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and somebody else that's all in is gonna win the thing if you're just halfway in. So
Yeah.
I would say, I actually heard this on a podcast recently, like, I would say that I've switched my mentality, and not to sound cocky, but like, I want to be fit enough to where I can confidently show up to a local event and like beat 90% of the people that are going to be there. And I'm happy with that. We just did a 12-hour race. Again, the Southwest like loves their early season, or I guess you could call this late season because it's December, but their lapped events. So I did a 12-hour solo, 16-mile lap to get ready for, and it's as many laps as you can do in the 12 hours to get ready for 24 hop, 24 hours of Old Pueblo, which happens in February. So that was a good little tune-up. And I mean, I was not riding out of my skin for any given lap. It's the name of the game is truly like pacing yourself and being able to have that aerobic base to finish out the 12 hours. And again, I haven't been riding, but like I did that, and I had a cleat position issue which caused some foot pain, but other than that, like, the next day I felt fine. The day after that I went for a run, and during the run I was like, dang, running is so much harder than riding. But yeah,
and you rode 140 some miles that day, right?
Yeah.
So
wow.
To go from like not not riding a whole lot, but still training a lot, to then be able to just hop on the bike and ride 140 some miles on mountain bike trails.
Yeah.
Like, that's a testament to, like, you still have the robustness as an overall athlete. It's not like, don't listen to what she's saying and think like, oh, well, she just wasn't training. Like, you were still training hard, you know, training
For sure.
higher volume.
Yeah.
It was just a mixture of modalities.
Yeah. And I mentioned that race to say it was like 3 days later that I went on the race website and looked for pictures, and I was like, I haven't even looked at results. That's insane. Like, that's such a switch of mentality compared to where I was a year ago or 2 years ago, where like all I cared about were the results. Like, I'm in a spot where I just want to do fun events and do these events that are going to help me, you know, see where I'm at, because I just like training. Like, I don't care about the results anymore. I just love training.
Cool.
So
yeah, so I think like, you know, a good takeaway for people that are listening to like, you know, you telling us about this year is like, while we all like to think that in order to be really good at cycling, you have to go all in and have to be, you know, 100% of your time has to be spent on the bike, you can mix in some of these other modalities that can complement it. Now, maybe it's not a 1-to-1 100% transfer of time in equals time out, or equals performance on the bike. Maybe it's 95%. But either way, like, there's a ton of overlap. And as long as you're staying true to what the nature of your training is intended to be, meaning like when you're going out on the cross country skis or the, running trails, and you're not just like hammering, because like that might conflict with whatever your overall structure is. As long as whatever you're doing in that other modality complements the structure that you're trying to bring to your overall training program, there can be a lot of benefits that carry over from mixing in some of these other modalities.
Mm-hmm.
I did a video on how cross training affects cycling performance and looking at different forms of cross training. Interestingly enough, the form of cross training that has the most crossover with cycling is actually Nordic skiing, cross country skiing.
Yeah, it's sweet.
In what way?
Well, they just found that it's been so long since I made that video, so I'd have to go back and look at the research. But I think what they found is they looked at a number of different sports. Like if you were to do that, like running, swimming, etc. If you were to do them, how much improvement could you see on the bike? And you'd see the most improvement on the bike if you cross country skied as opposed to any of the other ones.
I think that's just because cross country skiing is so good. Because I would say a runner, you would say the same thing. Like, what's going to benefit you the most for running? Cross country skiing,
probably
for sure,
skiing.
over cycling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sweet.
Do we
I
want
sucked up
to?
20 minutes there. So who's
Do
next?
you want to roll like straight from our 2024 into what Caitlyn's doing for 2025? Since we're already, I don't know.
Yeah, we should do that.
So
yeah.
let's tell us what your, maybe as of right now at least, what your A events might be and what you might do to mix up your training this year, if any.
I think I'm going to keep doing more of the same, because I think any event that I sign up for is going to be endurance, dipping into ultra endurance. So I'm going to start the year in February with the 24-hour race. And then...
You know what's funny about that is if I were to ask you right now, like, do you think your training's been more focused or less focused? You'd probably say less focused, right? Like, but you're doing like ultra, like you're doing ultra events, which is just like, that's just funny. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of cool.
Ultra events, but I would say the volume during the week is pretty low, which is...
So yeah, that's what I mean. Like you're, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I just think it's neat that you're probably riding and training less seriously than you were 2 years ago when you were working with Adam or with me. And now you're going after, a lot of people would say like harder events, which is like an interesting mix.
And I'm in a different position now too, that I'm recovering, because as I've talked about on this podcast before, I had a pretty serious sleep condition, like actually considered to be severe sleep apnea, and didn't realize. And now
you're living in a van.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that too.
And it was probably overtrained, not because of the training, but because I wasn't recovering. And then got the CPAP that, sounds dramatic, but truly changed my life. I had the CPAP for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then did tour of the White Mountains and said, like, to my friends that were there, like, I'm just riding this thing. And as the race, I think that was a 50-mile race, part of the Epic Ride series. And as the race went on, I just felt better and better, and was like, okay, I'll just push a little bit. And didn't know how far ahead first was, but I took second, and I was like, wow, this changes everything. Like, sweet. I felt so good. But yeah, as far as this year, like I said, more of the same. I don't have a ton of events like on the calendar right now. If it's close and support local, I'll probably hop in for fun. Yeah, more, do the ski racing again. There's a Cotulla, it's called Cotulla Uphill, a ski race, like skimo race.
Skimo, yeah. Sweet.
So just fun stuff to mix it up and yeah.
Sweet.
All
But
right.
I think one more thing I want to mention, because if you're an athlete that has a coach, and you specifically, you got a coach for the sake of accountability because you feel like it's the motivation isn't there, or you're somebody who doesn't really like structure, but getting a coach is going to change you as a person and you're going to stick to the structure. I've tried so hard to put myself in that box, but like I like waking up in the morning and deciding what I'm going to do. So if that's you, like don't work harder than you need to. Like talk to your coach and maybe the coach can work with you and figure out a plan. That's like something that I've been implementing is I have a goal at the end of the week that I want to do 2 runs, 3 rides, 3 yoga sessions. And that gives me the flexibility to wake up in the morning, and if I had a ride on and I don't feel like riding, then I'm going to go for a run and do a yoga class, or I'm going to strength train and do a hard bike workout when I feel like it. So
That's really good.
I'm still getting it all in, but it's not like I don't have that, I need to do this, and then I kind of am mentally half in, half out.
There's a psychological method behind what you just said. It's called the self-determination theory. It's all about autonomy, competence, and relationship, I think. I'm pretty sure. Or community. But the first thing is autonomy, and that's a lot of what you were talking about, is like having the freedom to choose your own destiny. And in general, we as humans thrive more. That's what this whole self-determination theory says, is we thrive more when we have autonomy. And so I tried to like implement that in coaching too, like especially in the off season when you can be super flexible. Like you can do a run or a ride. Like I will often leave that in the athletes ball court, or what do you say that? What's that phrase? I'll leave the ball in their court. I'll leave the ball in their court. Yeah. And I'm so bad at those. But
you have so many of them and you screw them up every time. I don't think you've ever said a quote and then not screwed it up.
Yeah, agreed. Anyways, I like all of what you were saying. I was thinking like, oh, self-determination theory, like having the freedom to do what you want to do on certain days is a good thing. So how we as coaches can implement that in our athletes' training is always a good thing. Yeah. I think.
And also making this mentality switch where I just decide what I feel like doing in the morning is pretty important moving forward, because we're at that point where we want to think about having kids, and when that happens, I'm still going to want to be active, but it's going to be a whole new world. So
for sure.
Bag. Wow. All right.
Yeah. Hey Drew, by the way, I think your audio switched devices or something.
Oh snap. I know, I saw that it messed up. Okay, I'll fix it.
All right. Dylan, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was going to say you want to go next, but you got me first. I'll go next.
All right.
Yeah, so 2020, so as we're recording this, I just put out a 33-minute video about how I trained for Unbound. So I feel like I'm reciting what I just said on YouTube. But yeah, so I guess I'll try to make it quick, because I'm sure that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably watched that video. Maybe I shouldn't make that assumption, but so with my 2024 training, if you will, started off on the wrong foot. I got a tonsillar abscess that I had to get drained, and that was during my off season. And I promise that's relevant to what I'm about to say. It doesn't seem incredibly relevant, but it is. So then I started my gym work, went through my base training, increased volume. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on in 2024 was that I ramped up way too quickly and then didn't give myself enough recovery afterwards. Like, I was just looking back at my training peaks making this video, and my first base block was a 20-hour week, a 25-hour week, and a 30-hour week. And that's a lot. at a very aggressive ramp, and especially, you know, for the first one, like I wasn't well trained when I started that block. I think it actually would have been okay if I hadn't doubled down on that aggressive ramp by not giving myself nearly enough recovery afterwards. So after that block, I basically had a 3-day recovery week before I did another 5-hour ride, which was so stupid.
Wow.
And then for like 2 weeks, I felt awful. Like I did a 15-hour week and a 16-hour week, which for me is not a lot, and it just kind of I was in this limbo period where I didn't feel good on the bike, but I didn't give myself enough time to recover. So I was just sort of in a hole. And I've been in that place before, so I knew exactly what I had to do. I'm like, look, you don't feel like you deserve it right now, but you need a actual rest week. You know, even you need a rest week, even though you just did a 15-hour week and a 16-hour week. That's not a lot for you, but you need the rest week because otherwise you're going to be in this limbo period. And I've been in that limbo for over a month, and it just wreaks havoc on your performance. So I gave myself a legitimate rest week, got back after that and felt good and finished out the base season. And I finished base season right as the first race started, which was Mid-South. That one went really well. In fact, I would probably say up until that point, that was maybe one of the best performances of my career, with the 5th place there. And yeah, 4th or 5th, depending on how you look at the sprint photo. And so then, you know, I had an average lead up to Sea Otter, increased intensity, did more race specific intervals, and Sea Otter went fine, I guess, nothing special. But I think that probably what people want to hear the most about is the Unbound block. And I feel like we've been talking about volume blocks every single episode for the last 5 weeks here. So I don't want to rehash this too much, but
for good reason. Keep going.
Yeah. So my Unbound block was a 35-hour week followed by a 40-hour week, and that would end 3 weeks before Unbound. And that's what I did. I did a 35-hour week and a 40-hour week. There were 4 intensity sessions, and then the rest was all zone 2.
Where did Gravel Locos fit into that?
I'm about to get to that.
My bad.
Hold your horses. So I did 4 intensity sessions in that 2-week period. They were all just tempo. I didn't do anything above tempo, mainly because I was worried that if I went too high with the intensity, it'd just be too much training load. So those were just like 2 by 30-minute tempo sessions, like not super fatiguing intervals.
In of those 14 days, how many days did you take off?
I had a rest day every 3 days, so it was 3 days total in the 2 weeks. So I finished that. I actually felt great. Like the second week I felt better than the first week, which is, you know, I've talked about this when I talk about block periodization, but it's like you almost feel better at the end of the block than the beginning of the block. It's sort of the stage race effect going on, but felt great. Started my recovery period, and then I was going to do Gravel Locos, which is 2 weeks out from Unbound. So that would be 1 week after this block ends. And I was driving out to Texas, started to get a sore throat. I was thinking, oh man, maybe I'm sick. But then I know what the difference, how a tonsillar abscess feels now versus a sore throat, and they do feel different. And I was like, I don't have a cold right now. I have another abscess. And by the time I got to Texas, I had to get that one drained as well. And I had to take 3 days in a row completely off the bike. Took antibiotics, had an allergic reaction to the antibiotics, and basically in that week following the block, I only rode 4 hours total and had 3 days completely off. And I actually think that was a blessing in disguise, because I that was going to be a recovery week anyway, but I was probably going to ride like 10 hours, and then I was going to do Gravel Locos. And that for sure would have been a whole lot more stressful than what I did do, which was almost nothing. And I do think that actually allowed me to recover from and absorb the massive training block that I had just done. And I didn't even feel like I needed the full 3-week period that I gave myself to recover for Unbound. Like I felt good to go 2 weeks or like a week before the race, so 2 weeks out from the block. Like I could have done Unbound the weekend before, and it probably would have been fine. And so I think moving forward, what I learned from that is that if you're gonna do something really crazy with your training, like a super crazy volume block for Unbound, where you're doing 40 plus hours a week for 2 weeks, you need to go crazy on the back end with the recovery. And the reason I say crazy is because like most athletes that have the capability of training like that or that much are going to have a really hard time training that little afterwards. So I'll probably try to actually do that on purpose this year instead of by accident. I mean, I could get into the rest of the season, but I feel like the rest of the season, it was, I tried some other volume blocks. I did, I think maybe a 30 or 35 hour week at altitude before Leadville. And Leadville went about average. I actually had a really good race at Schwamigan after a volume block. Like you would think that a volume block wouldn't be good for Schwamigan because it's a 2-hour punchy race. And I wasn't even doing the volume block to be good for Schwamigan. I was doing it to be good for the Rad and Big Sugar. And out of those 3 that I just mentioned, I was the best at Schwamigan. So I'm kind of like the whole volume block thing is like, after that, I was thinking, I think that this could actually apply to more than just Unbound, because in my head before I was like, this is a Unbound specific thing that I'm doing right now, and I don't necessarily know that that's the case.
So you did 3 different volume blocks throughout the season, would you say that?
Yeah. So the Unbound block was 2 weeks, and then the other ones were just 1 week.
And did you change up the structure of the interval days for those?
No.
Okay, so even for Leadville and for Schwamigan, you were just doing tempo for those days.
I'd have to go back in my training peaks, but yeah, I believe so. And I just do 2 in the week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is pretty wild to see it transfer that well to a race like Schwamigan, which is, I mean, there's a fair bit of tempo on some of the gravel like transfer sections, but I would say for the most part it's a very stochastic, punchy race.
I mean, if you look at the power file from that race, you're hitting 500-600 watts constantly. So
yeah, so that's cool. I mean, there's probably some level of just muscular endurance that you build through the volume block training and having those tempo days that like maybe that does transfer over to the punchier efforts of Schwamigan. But
yeah, and let me say too, it's not like I didn't do any punchy efforts before Schwamigan. I just didn't do punchy efforts during the volume block. Like leading into Schwamigan, I did have some 30-30s and VO2 sessions. So it's not like I had ignored high intensity leading into Schwamigan.
Sure.
But just during the volume block itself, I did not do that.
So even that though, so it shows that the volume block supports maybe some of those higher intensity efforts thereafter too.
Sure.
Which is cool to see.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And then this might be oversimplifying it, but racing is some of the best training. And in those gravel races that you've done prior to Schwamigan, like you're responding to attacks fatigued because those races are so long.
Yeah. It was just kind of funny, like the whole out of Schwamigan, the Rad, and Big Sugar, I would say Schwamigan was my lowest priority. These are all end of the season races, which is why I'm lumping them together. I'd say Schwamigan was my lowest priority, and it was the race that I ended up doing the best in out of the 3. So
cool.
Yeah. And what are you doing for this year? Volume blocks? Are you going to start doing? Are you going to just do a 2-on, 1 off plan
constantly?
Yeah,
just the whole time.
I've literally thought about that.
You know what I've actually thought? I'm not going to do this, but you know what I've thought about doing is 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off. So like you do 35 hours, 10 hours, 35 hours, 10 hours, 35 hours, 10 hours.
I thought about like a
constant wave.
I thought about a 3 on, 1 off, but the second week is like your big weeks are 1 and 3, and then 2 is like medium. Because oftentimes that just ends up happening to me. I start the block motivated. Second week, crap happens. Third week, I'm like, gotta finish strong. So like my first and my third week are always the two big ones. And the middle block just sucks. I'm like, well, I should just like maybe just plan that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What if that's the thing? That's your thing that just gets you into the top 10. Like,
Yeah, maybe.
Why
I mean,
are you saying, I thought about it, but I'm not going to do it?
Yeah, but like, there's no research to back what I just said.
There's no research to back anything until it's done.
Yeah, and
I guess
some things are so nuanced that like there's not gonna be research on something that specific.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, there's not research on volume blocks. There's research on intensity blocks.
Yeah.
There's actually a fair amount of research on intensity blocks, and it's like, if you just look at the research, intensity blocks look like the, I don't know, golden key or the magic pill, or
I mean, I kind of disagree.
whatever,
like
but
all you're talking about is, yeah, you're calling them volume blocks, but you're talking about increasing volume. And I would say that if you summarize all of Seiler's research, all of his research, if you were to summarize it, would say more volume is better. Like all those studies that he did on the Olympic skiers, I think, like all of the Olympic skiers that ended up getting gold medals were doing more volume than the ones that didn't get gold or whatever. Like that's basically what the studies say.
Yeah,
it
I mean,
all points
I think
to
the
volume.
difference, like why it's we'd lump it into volume block is because you're doing more than what is sustainable, and that's the same thing with the intensity block. You're compacting more than would normally be sustainable for a long period of time into a short period of time, and it's that excessive overload that the research, at least with intensity blocks, shows like the body's response to that intense overload is what contributes to the bump in fitness. So I mean, you would expect there would be some kind of similar phenomenon that happens with the volume blocks. Maybe it's just harder for them to do research on volume blocks because they can't get enough people to train 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a very difficult study to do because people don't want to train that much. They have lives.
Yeah. So with 2025, I mean, I'm guessing your goals are the same. At least this year, your two biggest A event. I mean, all the Lifetime Grand Prix events you'd probably consider to be A events, but your two biggest ones that you put the most time and emphasis into was Leadville and Unbound. Is that going to be the same for this year?
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think you'll do anything different to try and prepare better for Leadville?
Yeah, Leadville didn't go bad by any means. It was just an average day for me, which, sometimes an average day is disappointing because like it's an A race and you put a lot into it, and you're not training to have an average day. You're training to have a good day.
Yeah.
Or a great day.
Especially because the year before you saw such a increase in performance.
Yeah.
That I'm sure the expectations were high.
Yeah. What would I do different for Leadville? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think maybe my biggest mistake for Leadville didn't even have anything to do with the training. I think I may have just picked a pacing number that was too high. Because I did suffer quite a bit in the second half, and the year before, I think I paced it absolutely perfectly. Like, I don't think I could have paced it any better. And this year I cannot say the same thing. And despite not pacing it well, I was only 2.5 minutes slower this year in arguably slower conditions too. Like, I think conditions last year were faster than conditions this year.
Sure. So,
I think I'll probably do volume block again. A volume block at altitude you need to be very cautious with that. But I don't think I was overtrained from the volume block. Like, I actually gave myself enough time to recover. Felt like I did the volume block correctly. It was not as much volume as my Unbound volume block, and I did that purposely because I was at altitude. So, I don't think the prep will be all that different. I think there's just some things on race day that need to be tweaked in terms of pacing.
So one thing that came up this year, unexpectedly, was Crusher got canceled. So you had a pretty long stint of non-racing happening between Unbound and Leadville. If in Crusher's not on the calendar for this year,
Yeah.
because it's not part of the series. So will you do anything different as far as trying to integrate additional races between Unbound and Leadville, or will you leave that 2-month gap in there?
No, I'm not going to take 2 months off of racing in the middle of the season.
Okay.
I will definitely do some. I think that the biggest race in that gap is going to be Steamboat. I think there's also a BWR Montana race, but that is the same day as Steamboat, which is an unfortunate timing. And then I think, maybe Core 4 is in there too, if I wanted to do that. And, there's some races to pick from in that time period.
I know who won that race. Tough field.
Okay, cool.
Sure you do. So, but as far as races go in between Unbound and Leadville, I think I'm already signed up for Steamboat. Steamboat would probably be the biggest one and potentially my biggest goal in that in-between period. Not that I'll train super specifically for it, because I will be training more specifically for Leadville. Leadville
Sure.
will continue to be my second A race behind Unbound. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of good Colorado races during that time too that you could look into.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, you want me to go or you want to go?
I'll go. I think yours is radical enough that we should save it for last.
It's also probably the shortest.
Okay, fair enough. To sum up, my 2024, in 2023, that was when I made the transition from like crit racing to gravel racing. So 2024 was the first year where I was like pretty much all in gravel racing. And so the biggest change that I was trying to make was just an increase in volume. And so I was just looking up some of my numbers from training, mostly just focused on volume from 2023 to 2024 as I transitioned from like crit racing and cross to gravel. In 2023, I only hit 4 months where I hit over 70 hours. And in 2024, I hit 8 months over 70 hours. And just in the first 5 months of the year, which is like typical base season, in 2023, I did 315. And this year I did 415, if you add up from January to May. And in 2025, I hope maybe it'll be 515. I don't know, but probably not. But I think it'll be more than 415. Like, I think I've just been getting more and more convinced of volume, not necessarily volume blocks, but just consistently volume. And a lot of times, like, people will mention Keegan's doing these crazy volume weeks. And they forget the fact that he's built up to that over 10, 15 years. Like, he was doing 20 plus hours in college 10 years ago. And now his body is so adapted to that he can do tons of 30 plus hour training weeks because he's built up to that. And so I think that's just been my trajectory as well. Not Keegan's, like, not that crazy, but I think it takes time to build up to that. You can't just start doing 30-hour weeks. And so I feel like, a few years ago, I was really trying to hit 20 hours a week. Like, I think last year, that was the big thing, was like, I want to try to hit 20 hours consistently, like week in and week out. So this year, I think I'm trying to bump that up closer to like 25. Like, how often can I hit 25 hours on a consistent basis, week in and week out? And then, of course, big blocks where I'm doing more than 30, but really consistently, I want to be pushing like 25 hours, and that's the normal on a normal week. So that's the big thing for 2025. In 2024, my big races were Unbound and Big Sugar. I like that because it evenly distributes your season into 2 peaks, where I can peak at the beginning of June, take a really serious off season for the rest of June. Like, I don't think I did a single race for the rest of June. Actually, take that back. I did like a local crit on the last day of June. And so I did Unbound, took like a whole week off the bike, and then another week of just easy riding, like a very serious mid-season break, and then ramp back up for Big Sugar at the end of October. And that gives you like plenty of a time to where you can basically do 2 whole training cycles between Unbound and Big Sugar. But talking about the crit racing, that was one thing in 2024 that I tried to do. I was trying to straddle the fence a little bit. I was like, I'm going to do gravel, but I'm also going to do a couple crits. And crit racing is not as much fun as it used to be when I'm not a crit racer. Like I don't have teammates to like hang out with. I don't have teammates to race with. You know, like you don't realize how helpful having teammates in a race is until you don't have any teammates in a race and you have to chase everything down. And if you want to be in the break, like you have to make sure you're in the break. Like if I had a teammate in the break, it's almost like I get to take it easy the rest of this race. I got a teammate up the road. But when you're your own team, it's like, oh crap, I missed the break. And I wasn't even like crit fit enough to even be viable to be in the break. And so as much as fun as I had crit racing when I was a crit racer, if I'm going all in on the gravel racing, I'm convinced that I can't do this straddling the fence, which is why I didn't do any cross this year. Cross Nats was literally 10 minutes from my house, and any other year I would have been like amped to the moon that Cross Nats was driving distance from my house. And this year I didn't even race. So, yeah, similar to like Caitlyn, I listened to a podcast that was all about like singular focus. And so I'm kind of on that right now. Like I'm going to be singularly focused. And right now that singular focus is Unbound for sure. I've got the Unbound bug and the Unbound itch. And so like I finished in 2018 when I DNF'd Unbound, I was immediately like, I'm never doing this race again. It sucks. And then maybe it was 2019. I don't know. And then I didn't do it again until last year and I finished. And as soon as I crossed the line, I was like, oh man, I know what I got to do to get better. Like, and I was already like pumped about this year. And so I'm excited about that. That's definitely like the A event of 2025. And so with that being the A event, my two big things are volume, which I already talked about, but I'm also doing reverse periodization, but like the full-fledged. Like I'm doing 30-30s right now. I'm going to do power intervals in the next block and then VO2, and I'm just going to go backwards from here all the way to Unbound. Me and an athlete, his name's Job. He'll appreciate the call out or the shout out. Me and him, he was asking me, he's like, why wouldn't you do a reverse periodization? So me and him talked for like 30 minutes and I gave him everything that I knew. And by the end of the 30 minutes after we had talked, I was like, I had convinced myself that I should do it. And so me and him are kind of going, I don't know, out on a limb and risking to do this thing that I've never done. I know a little bit about reverse periodization, but not enough to like be a pro on it. Okay, we'll go get some in a minute. Okay.
You know, as you get closer to your event, your training should look more specific to that event. So it just makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, Drew and I, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. You know, on paper, reverse periodization is taking traditional periodization, flipping it on its head. But when you're looking in the context of a race like Unbound, you could argue that that's actually the correct way you should periodize your training. Because you're getting more and more specific to what the demands of the race will be.
That was the main thing.
So I mean, like the unknowns are like, how does your body respond to going in the opposite direction as far as like, you know, going through the energy systems, you know, starting high intensity and transitioning. You know, typically you would think of the lower intensity supporting the higher intensity. So like how well will your body respond to that?
Yeah.
But I think it, you know, on paper for Unbound, it actually does make some sense.
Yeah. The big thing that me and Job were talking about was like, if being able to do tempo is the most important thing for Unbound, that's what Dylan just did. His massive block that he did before Unbound was a tempo block. That was the only intensity he was doing, and volume. So if I'm the most fit when I'm doing my tempo, and I'm doing that tempo the 2 months leading up to Unbound, that would be the most specific for that event. And I think the thing that like really resonated with me and like convinced me of it is like, I want to be the most fit when I'm doing my tempo training so that I can do really high quality tempo sessions, because that's specific for Unbound. Like if I do normal periodization and I'm doing 30-30s, those 30-30s would be really good. They wouldn't be very specific to Unbound. So that was a big reason. And then another reason I was convinced to do this, even though the main reason I wouldn't do reverse periodization is because I've never done it before. So like it's kind of new territory for me. But another reason that I convinced myself to do it was the whole wild card thing with the Lifetime GP. If I want a wild card into the Lifetime GP, I have to get really good results at Sea Otter Gravel, which is a 100-mile gravel race, and then Unbound 200. So doing reverse periodization is actually really good for the Sea Otter Gravel race because I should be coming right off of a threshold block going into Sea Otter, and I will have already done a VO2 block before that. So going into the Sea Otter 100-mile gravel race, which is going to require a lot of time in threshold and VO2, I will have trained a lot of threshold VO2 before that race. And so hopefully the training up to that point will be more specific for Sea Otter. And then I'll transition to doing more specific training for Unbound. And I won't just end up doing tempo for 6 months. I will have flipped the whole thing. So that's the biggest thing. And with also like the advice that I've heard from Dylan, like I think with radical training comes radical recovery. So I think my off weeks are going to be like not totally off the bike, but they're going to be very, very low volume. Like the weeks that I am doing a recovery week, just to like learn from Dylan's mistakes. Cause it's right. Like so the example I just gave of like, if you're looking at your monthly volume, like you could totally get sucked into that and be like, oh, like if I do 3 really big weeks, but then I do, I want to do more volume.
One extra
week. I want to do more volume on my recovery week so I don't lose all so that monthly number is bigger. But if you get sucked into that and you don't give yourself the recovery because you're chasing some arbitrary number, like I'm not chasing arbitrary numbers. I'm chasing results. So I don't care if I use that as an example, but I try not to look at that stuff too much and get too crazy with it because I just want to do what's right regardless of what the numbers are saying.
I really think one of you, instead of just like trying to consistently build that volume, needs to do like what Dylan was talking about, like big volume week. Huh? Because that is like the main principle of training. Hans Selye's gas model, general adaptation syndrome. It's like you're at homeostasis, you introduce a stimulus, you go through that alarm phase, and then there's the resistance to that, aka super compensation. So if you're doing, instead of just like consistently building volume, you're doing this, you have this big stimulus, you recover enough, you're gonna have that super compensation, you're gonna adapt to the training, and then that it would still be consistently building volume because that next block will be bigger. But I'm excited to hear
see what you're saying.
Sweet. Anything else, Drew?
No, I think that's it. Dylan, do you have any? I want Dylan to be like, you're an idiot. I know. I really want Dylan. I want Dylan to say, dude, you're an idiot. Why are you doing this?
Did you want me to comment on?
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? I want to hear. Yeah, I really do. I want to hear your thoughts. I don't think I've told you this before this recording.
Yeah, I don't think you have. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm not going to call you an idiot. I don't think it's a bad idea.
Why aren't you doing it?
I'm not going to do it. But like, I'm not going to do it, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that every point that you raised makes sense. And sometimes, like, I've heard of Ironman triathletes doing the same thing because, for example, the effort that you do in an Ironman triathlon it's a very steady effort, and you're kind of just holding tempo power. I will say that I used to think that Unbound was a tempo race, and then last year I will say that I was hitting 500 watts a lot, like even late in the day.
Well, your mindset in strategy changed. In years past, you were trying to race it more as a race against you in the course, right? You know, like whereas last year you raced the race.
That's true, but I also think the race has changed,
and the race has changed for sure. Yeah.
So,
We've also talked about, you know, you can also integrate some maintenance workouts into other phases of training. You know, like you could do a VO2 max workout every, 12 days or something, and that would probably be enough to maintain that that high intensity power and even repeatability without having to focus on that.
Right. Which is probably what I would do, Drew.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't.
Oh yeah,
you know.
yeah. I plan to do 2 blocks of tempo, and one of those blocks will be tempo with intensity. And those are like some of my favorite workouts to do anyways, where it's like a 30-minute block of tempo, and every 5 minutes you sprint, or every 5 minutes you do a 1-minute VO2 or something like that.
And I would probably do that as your second block,
going
the
into
block that's directly leading into
So I think
Unbound.
that those are going to be the most specific intervals. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yep. I think the red flags with it that I've found so far are a lot of times we say like, oh, you want to lift heavy in the gym early in the year when your training intensity is low. So if you do reverse periodization, that kind of kicks that to the curb, because right now I'm trying to lift heavy and I'm trying to do hard bike workouts at the same time. And I think it's still possible. You just have to plan those things out very well. So I always do my high intensity bike workouts, and the day after I do that, I do my hard lifting. And if you plan it out, I think it's still doable.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the main thing you'd probably need to just keep an eye on there is just like overall chronic load. You know, it's like maybe your high intensity bike sessions are just shorter in volume.
Yeah.
So that you're not carrying as much fatigue into the next day for the gym.
Yeah, that's a good
Just because you
point.
stack too many of those into a week where they're just like really heavy load days.
Yeah.
And that's where you might find a problem 2 months down the road.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Just keep an eye on it.
naturally that's been happening. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, Adam. Are you gonna be a gym bro? Are you like I'm
No.
I'm waiting for you to say like I'm gonna enter a lifting competition in June. That's what
I did have a brief stint where I was interested in I'd watched a video on the tactical games.
Oh,
which
I've
is like,
heard of those, but it's where you like it's like endurance and sharpshooting combined, isn't it?
Endurance, CrossFit,
Yeah.
and yeah, like you throw in some sharpshooting or whatever.
They're kind of a big deal,
it's
aren't they? I mean, I've heard people
I
talk about the tactical games before.
Sounds cooler than high rocks.
Yeah, sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Would you rather be
But,
the
yeah,
tactical games national champ or the cyclocross 30-35 national champ? Like, I'm taking tactical games every time, dude.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to end up doing that,
Okay.
but it sounded cool. Like that was something that piqued my interest for a little while. I would say like a big theme for me for this year was just pretty radical change. So this is my first year, quote unquote, being retired from elite level racing, where and like for me, I think in order to have like a healthy transition out of that life, I needed to have like a pretty radical transition too. So I like took a pretty significant step back, which I think was good. It wasn't like I was trying to hold on for dear life to this thing that I'd like just let go of. It was like I needed to just like throw it in the trash completely and like forget about it and move on. And for me, it was like, it's been really good. Like this was actually one of my most fruitful years, I would say, like overall as an athlete, because I got to just like be an athlete. Like generally, I got to kind of like Caitlyn was talking about, like being really good at a lot of things instead of being like excellent at one thing allowed me to like just have a lot of fun as an athlete.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
There were days when like, I don't know if this is exactly what happened, but in my mind, this is how I remember it, where like days where like me and Dylan are bragging about like, oh, how far did you ride? And we're like, oh, I rode 100 miles. And then we'd be talking about that. And then Adam would post a picture of him like wakeboarding, and I'm like, "Yep, you got to." I'm like, Adam's doing it right. Like, we're so focused on this thing, and Adam's over here wakeboarding, and we're like, "Dang, he's like, I don't know." There was a part of me that was like, "That's pretty cool." Like, you were with us a year ago, like, oh, how many miles are you doing? And now you're out doing awesome stuff like that. I was like, that's pretty cool. There was definitely a part of me that was like, that envied that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I like what I fell in love with this year was just being an athlete in like whatever context that that landed in at the time, it didn't really matter. It just like whatever felt right to me. Like the only events that I actually trained for specifically, like that I actually wanted, performance and results at, were two main events: Mid-South single speed race and the Dakota 5.0 mountain bike race. And that happened in March and in September. Other than that, like the only other goal I had performance wise was I wanted to win all of the local events, which I'd never done that before. I'd always like, come in second or third at a couple of them throughout the year. Which ironically enough, like this is the year that I've put the least amount of emphasis on bike racing at all. And I did win all the local events this year, which is kind of cool. Like I got to check that box. I also did like pretty well at Mid-South. And then I did like pretty decent at the Dakota 5.0. And what I did for those was kind of similar to like Dylan, your approach was like, I put in a block event or block training before Mid-South. I put in some block training before Dakota 5.0, but otherwise like it was like pretty average every single week. I was maybe exercising 10 hours a week, like across the board. So that included running, ruck running, riding, strength training, whatever. Like I was doing a lot of different things, but like cumulatively, like every week was about 10 hours, which is, half of what I was doing in years past just on the bike, not even including some of the other modalities. But what I found overall, I went through like a pretty drastic, like physiological, like body composition change. But I've felt like way stronger, more fit, and just healthier overall throughout this whole season, like the whole year. I never got sick a single time in 2024. I like always felt like at any given moment, if someone called me to like go do something, whether it was like running, hiking up a mountain, riding, like I could go do a 100-mile ride whenever I wanted, or I could go do like a half marathon whenever I wanted, or like go to the gym or whatever, which is like just fun. Like that's where I said like I fell in love with like just being an athlete again instead of like being trying to be a professional bike racer. And it just like makes for a more I found like a well-balanced lifestyle. So that was cool. Like I literally, I was just looking, you guys were pulling up Training Peaks. I didn't use Training Peaks once this year for myself.
Wow.
But I did upload everything to Strava. So I could at least look at like the trends on Strava. And the only week that I put in over 20 hours of exercise was the week that I went to Andorra Epic. Because we raced for 25 hours in that period. So I did like a 25-hour week, which that's what I considered to be kind of like my volume block before the Dakota 5.0. And then I put in like maybe one other block week before the 5.0. But other than that, like I only did one other week the entire season where I exercised more than 15 hours in 1 week. That was it. So pretty low volume overall. So here's the thing. So for 20, so my fitness has completely tanked in the last 3 months though. I've been like, all of my time that I like had extra time to like exercise, I've been hunting, and I've just like completely dropped off. Like the last time I did more than 5 hours of exercise in 1 week was the last week of September. So,
Dang.
So like I've really dropped off. But also at that time I crashed really hard and broke my thumb and like tore some ligaments in my thumb. So I've been like trying to let that heal. So here's kind of like a twist for my 2025. So I have to get surgery on my thumb in January. And the recovery from that is going to be anywhere from like 2 to 3 months, likely without having normal function of my hand. So I'm not really sure what the early part of next year is going to look like as far as riding bikes at all. I might not even ride bike outside until March or April probably. So no 24 hours in the El Pueblo for me, unfortunately, Caitlyn. I won't see you there.
How are you going to pull a bow?
I don't know how I'm going to do anything for 2 months. It's going to suck. But I have to do it because they said it right now, like my thumb might only ever heal to like 50% of normal function.
Oh, wow.
So I don't want to like have prolonged issues with my hand or thumb just because I'm like stubborn and, don't want to take 2 months off. So it's like, just bite the bullet, do it now, get it over with. But I did, so here's the kind of the twist in why this kind of works out. I did just apply for a local 50K trail run.
Nice.
That is in May. So it's application only. It's invite to apply only. So they're only letting 50 people in. I have no idea how many people are going to apply for it. But if I do get in, which I hope I do, part of me hopes I do, part of me hopes I don't, just so I don't have to actually do it. But if I do get in, like the timing of that would work out pretty well, because like the one thing that I know for sure I'll be able to do a lot of after surgery is run. Like it's not going to have any impact on my ability to go outside and run. So like that would give me something to at least look forward to during that time of recovery from the surgery, where I'm not able to ride outside likely for a couple months. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do for a couple months. Might impact like skiing, and I probably won't be able to cross country ski and stuff like that. So if I could at least have something to look forward to and kind of like put my attention towards, that should help the recovery process quite a bit. And then again, the only other racing that I like plan on doing will probably be South Dakota based stuff. So there's a gravel race out here in June that I'd like to do. I've won that in the past, and I'd like to go back and compete for the overall there. And then the Dakota 5.0 again. So so Caitlyn, kind of going back to like what you were saying, like one of you guys should try this, like, volume overload or intensity overload on a consistent basis. Here's my plan for 2025. I'm going to implement this. So in 2024, my training, I never did a single interval under threshold. So from January through, I kind of stopped training in like, early October or end of September. It was like mid-October that I kind of stopped doing any intervals. Literally never did a single interval that was shorter than 8 minutes. So, longer than 8 minutes. So all of it was like super threshold, hard threshold efforts all the way up to like anaerobic stuff. And I like that a lot. It's like my favorite type of training is anything that's like super high intensity. I didn't have a coach, so like I didn't have anyone telling me I had to do something a specific way. But here's what I'm going to implement for 2025. I'm going to try this 12 straight months of, well, it won't be 12 months probably, because I'll probably again stop in like October, but like 9 or 10 straight months of block training.
Wow.
Where,
nice.
Yes. And here's part of it. Part of the motive is I don't really want to have to train 15, 20 hours a week every week. I just like don't have the time or the energy or the motivation to do that. But I do like being able to like have a hard week where it's like, I'm going to do 20 hours this week, and then like I can take 2 or 3 weeks to just kind of chill. And I'm going to oscillate between one intensity block and then one volume block, and then an intensity block and then a volume block.
Dude, Adam's going to win Schwamigan now.
But I'm like excited about it because it gives me something where it's like for 1 week I can put my head down and train super hard and feel like a high performing athlete again. And then I can kind of just go into maintenance mode like I've been doing most of this year, which I really enjoy too, and take my attention off of, hard training. So I'm curious to see how it's going to work. I think one thing that I'll for sure have to be mindful of is like making those recovery weeks super easy, which I don't think will be a problem. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
So is it intensity, volume, recover?
No, so what I'm going to do is like, I'll do like an intensity block in January. So I'll do probably the first week of January, I'm going to do like a 5-day block. And then I'll do like a recovery week, and then 2 just kind of like maintenance weeks. And then the next month, so the first week of February, I'll do a volume block. So I'll do like 20 hours and then repeat that cycle.
Sick.
Yeah.
That's
It'd be fun.
Be good.
That was the best one out of all 4 of us.
Yeah, and it has the potential to end the worst, but we'll find out. Yeah.
Nice.
The thing that'll be different is well, it's been a while. It's probably been 3 or 4 years since I've done any intensity running wise. But with the surgery coming up, like it might force me to have to do some of that intensity running. I could do it on the trainer, I guess, too, but I'll be a little bit more motivated to do it running.
Skate ski without poles too, and that's gonna be hard. Are you?
Yeah, I don't know that I could skate ski with like much intensity without poles. I could, maybe a little bit, but the terrain around here is like pretty flat for the most part. So I think it'd be tough to. Maybe I could. I'll have to experiment with it. The hardest part is probably going to be like having gloves that fit well over the cast. I don't know how that's going to work. Maybe just giant mittens, but yeah, so I'm pretty excited about it. It'll be kind of something fun. One thing that I've liked about the last year is I've gotten to try a lot of different things with my training that I can then carry over and apply into like my athletes' regimes. So like I've done a lot of fasted intensity training this year, a lot of like fasted training in general, just to like try different things. Because I've got athletes that like can't train other than 5:30 in the morning, and it's like we need to know, like, can your body respond well if you go into that fasted so you don't have to wake up at 3:30, twice a week. So like I've kind of like taken onus to like try some of these things on myself first and see how it works. Or like stacking 2 intensity sessions in one day, like was it the Norwegian method or whatever? Like I've done a fair bit of that this year where it's like, 2 threshold sessions in a day to see like how did I respond to that? Because I don't like to just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks with my athletes if I don't have either research to pull from or anecdote to pull from. I'd rather be like my own guinea pig before I try it on an athlete. So it's been cool because like I really like my whole season is like low risk. Like there wasn't, there were 2 races that I actually cared about as far as performance goes, and I could control the acute preparation 2 or 3 weeks leading up to that. But other than that, like there was no risk with trying some of these things. So like that's how I look at 2025. Like there's really no risk, and other than like if I somehow got so overtrained from this block periodization or from this block training that I don't know, it like actually affects my health, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. I'm not too concerned about it. So it's like pretty low risk, but I feel like could be some cool takeaways from it.
You know how when Lachlan was first getting into gravel racing, they always would say like, oh, here's the alternative calendar, his alternative calendar. I feel like, Adam, you're doing like alternative training. So if people want to sign up for standard coaching, we got that. And then we got Adam over here with his alternative coaching, if that's what you're into.
Yeah, could be.
All right, speaking of, I really got to get on the bike. Like, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah, we're good. I think we covered it all. If anyone out there that's listening wants more specifics on any of the stuff we talked about, feel free to send in a question and we can put that into one of our future episodes. But cool, this was fun. We don't get to do this a whole lot where we just talk about what we've been doing. So this was fun.
Oh, I can't wait to do this next year and see.
See what happens.
How that panned out. Yeah.
That'd be
good. All right, sweet. Okay, guys, have a great New Year and holiday and everything else coming up. We'll see you in 2025.
Thanks for listening to us this year.